Levitt from DeltaCX.com, a full-service CX and UX agency, and welcome to today's podcast. It is February 3rd, 2021. We made it, and this is episode 96, and we're calling it UX Recruiter Do's and Don'ts. So if you have a question for a UX recruiter, start typing it everywhere you can. You can ask your questions in all of the chat rooms. I'm not watching my email today, so please try to use the LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitch chat rooms. I am monitoring all of those with my magic. So let's bring in our guest, and this is Nick Grantham from the UK recruiting company, Zebra People. Nick, who the heck are you? And please spell your name.
Hi there, Debbie. My name is Nick Grantham. I work as a principal UX recruitment consultant for Zebra People in the UK, and my name is spelled Nick, and then Grantham, which is Grantham. So that's me, and I've been doing UX recruitment, specifically UX recruitment, for about 9 years now. So back when information architects were all the rage, and I have actually got a design background. So I studied, I got a degree in product and transport design before selling my soul and getting into sales and recruitment. So I like to think around not even 180, but I've come around a bit in the last 9 years or so, and so I've been doing specifically UX recruitment and related things like service design, user researchers, etc. Product designers more recently, for the last nine or so years now.
Super. Then I'm going to jump right into the meaty questions while people start tuning in, and hopefully it's going live in all the known places. Let's see if I got my... Yes, I got my YouTube notification. I've got my Twitch notification. Good. We are very live. So let me start with one that's probably on a lot of people's minds. What are some of the key mistakes you see on resumes or CVs for people trying to get UX jobs?
Well, one of the things I think that got you and I in touch in the first place is, if you're trying to over-egg who you are or what you've accomplished or what level you're at, that thing will irk a lot of people, but also it's just those things where I think historically we're almost trained to tell a bit of a white lie and embellish our CVs a little bit. But actually, I do find a lot of clients they also obviously a lot of time want to pigeonhole people, and I think if you're someone who's midweight and you're applying for a midweight role, but you're saying you're a lead level person on your CV with 2 years experience, it's not always going to wash. That's an obvious one, and I feel like we've had that LinkedIn post and it's done the rounds and everyone knows about it. But I think the other thing on CVs is a really minor thing, but again, from a readability perspective or even a UX perspective, when you see CVs and there are more than one email address or telephone number or way of contacting you, I just need an email address and a phone number, that's it. Don't start telling me about all these other accounts unless it is showing it links to a portfolio, for example, or your social media LinkedIn profile. The other thing is too much information. I don't really want to know about what projects you did for a BP gig 10 years ago. A title, I want to see some history there as to how you've got into what you're doing now, but I'm most interested in the last few years. So sometimes I'll get CVs which are just pages and pages and pages long. To be honest with you, you could be the most experienced person in the world. I'm only looking for a 2-page CV. If you're junior to mid, that can go on 1 page. I always say the CV should show where you've worked, and the portfolio will show how you've worked. And it's that how which will determine what kind of a designer you are, whether that's UX, UI, product, whatever. The portfolio can show that to me. The CV, I just want to know a bit about your pedigree. And the other thing is, this sounds a bit harsh, but sometimes I'll have half a page telling me about how passionate someone is about UX. Great, I don't want to take away someone's passion for that, but the amount of times I read the same passage over and over saying, they live for human interaction, they want to do good for mankind, blah, blah, blah. That is brilliant. I can't take that away from you. Go and build a well or something like that. But, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference as to whether I'm going to decide to put that person forward for a role or not. It's commendable, but it's just taking up a lot of a lot of space on the CV, which isn't really going to make a whole lot of difference, in all honesty, from my point of view anyway.
I am so happy to hear this, because I do advise people when I look at their resumes and CVs that some of that opening chatter, sometimes I'm not sure if it's important. The top of my resume, I used it to say, look, I'm usually a utility player. People bring me into companies. They put me in multiple roles because I have a broad number of strengths. Here's some things that I do, and I have kind of the prosy, keywordy version of it. But I don't have the aspirational, like, I'm a high empathy, passion. So
Yeah.
my first question is, what's my second question really at this point is, would you suggest that people reduce or take out things that are personal and emotional, like I'm a highly passionate, user-centered, empather?
That particular line, yeah, take that out, what job you're going for. But I think it depends as well as to what job you're looking for. If you're looking for contract work, then it really is less relevant. I think I'll always want a bit of a snapshot, at least a one-liner as to who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, and that will do. Especially for contract work. For contract work, I just want to dive straight into seeing what you've been up to recently. Positions held and where you've worked, and then I'm onto the portfolio. For permanent positions, yeah, I need a bit more of a narrative as to who are you. Yeah, again, add a few encouraging adjectives in there to begin with, but then cut it off, and then I want to know things like hobbies, interests. Yeah, I want to know about that past UX. I'm not always looking for a 9 to 5 UXer or 9 to 6, whatever. But so yeah, it will depend on what sort of job you're going for. And even still, if you're looking at a permanent role, I want a bit of a story about who you are, what makes you tick, but I don't need a biography, in all honesty. And again, more will be found out through talks, meetings, once we get past Corona, and then obviously onto the portfolio again. But the other thing actually with CVs that happens a lot, I kind of don't have a huge gripe against them, but I know others do. And at the end of the day, others, when I say others, I'm talking about hiring managers. So they're the ones who make the decisions whether people get interviewed or not, will be their own scoring for how good they are at something like typing or software usage.
Right. I'm
And that's a
80%
very common thing.
wireframing.
Yeah.
I'm
Or 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10.
47%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's very subjective.
Visual.
Is that the way? Yeah,
And
that's your own
subjective.
opinion. Yeah. So I get that. What I've seen before is someone who put like, I like to think I'm pretty good at these things. I'm okay at these things. I've had basic interaction with these things, and it's really sort of like layman's terms. But I kind of, it's a bit tongue in cheek. But I liked it. It's quite honest. Whereas the scoring thing, I've seen juniors who said they're 10 out of 10 for prototyping. But, so are you saying that if you were next to someone with 10 years prototyping experience and you've got 1 year's experience, are you the same?
You're
10 out of 10?
Equally as good. Yes.
Yeah.
You have no room to grow. You are perfect.
Exactly. I kind of think it, and generally the skills thing, again, lots of people will list it out. I much prefer anyway. So everyone will put, if they have a CV like that, they will have the usual buzzwords noted, and that's great if you're wanting to be found by a buzzword recruiter. So recruiters will often search for CVs using what's called a Boolean search, where they'll bring up key buzzwords. So hence why a lot of developers get tapped up for UX jobs sometimes, because a brief might have mentioned HTML or CSS, and that cowboy recruiter that doesn't really know enough is then buzzword searching HTML, CSS to go and find a UXer. That's how I think sometimes that happens. But yeah, I much prefer contextualized. So if you are good at wireframing and prototyping and good with Figma and Axure and OmniGraph, whatever, then contextualize it. Tell me about it. I don't need it listed out the same way that 100 other people will list it in their CVs, because it doesn't really tell me anything about your capabilities, because people will list those softwares or those skills regardless of how you're at it or not.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I'm one of Acture's recommended trainers, and I would give myself a 9 out of 10. There's always more to
Yeah,
learn.
stick that on there. Yeah, stick that on there. But you can leave the scoring system, but just put on there, one of Excel's recommended trainers, or even if you weren't a recommended trainer, just say, I'm
Four
proficient
years of
in
Acture.
this role. Yeah, exactly. In this role, we predominantly use Azure and or in the contracts, tools used or whatever. You could do it like that, but contextualize it more than list it, I think.
Yeah, thanks. And the chat room loves the advice too. Marisol says the design of the CV says a lot about if they understand how to make design decisions. And Vishal agrees and says if you're not considering the recruiter's experience when applying for a UX role, it's a little ironic. And Vishal also says I've seen sliding scales on resumes and it's confusing to say the least. Yeah, I tend to ask people to take those off. We've got a question over on Twitch from Ralitza. And the question is, hey, Nick, as a recruiter, do you look at relevant skill set, not only direct experience in the field? I find myself regularly disappointed how people completely dismiss transferable skills in my resume. She's in the process of, I know her personally, she's transitioning into UX from previous, a lot of like project management, Scrum Master stuff. And it sounds like people are not noticing that she's got transferable skills and work maturity. How can she tell her story better?
Yeah, in all honesty, that's a good question, and it's a tricky one because I come across that a lot because obviously the UX market has had loads of people wanting to get involved with it now, and coming from other skill sets, other sectors or titles, and it's a tricky one because they're at the hesitant to say junior because you've got a certain amount of commercial experience. I'm not referring to someone as a junior per se, but junior within the field of UX. There's a lot of people there who are at those sorts of jobs, and a lot of clients can have they can sort of cherry pick people who've got more commercial experience as a UX designer already. So it's hard. It's definitely not impossible, but it is harder. On the other end of the scale, once you've got a few years of experience under your belt, then you're on easy street. You're picking the jobs. But in that case, a lot of it will depend on the relationship. I think if you're dealing with a recruiter, it might depend on our relationship with the client. If I know a client really well and I know the candidate well, and I can say, look, if you look at this person's CV, you're initially probably going to think no, but let me tell you about this candidate. And if I've got that relationship with the client, then they're much more susceptible to me to listening to what I have to say and listening to my reasoning and thinking, okay, you know what? Yeah, on paper, this isn't the obvious choice, but now you talk to me about it. That makes sense. That makes sense, and that will work. But it's hard to sort of rely on which recruiters are going to have the best relationships all the time, and I can't always promise to do it. But one thing I sometimes wonder about is if you were to go to a client where they've got a UX team there. Let's say you're a project manager, and you go to a client. They've got a UX team. Could you try and look at sidestepping your way into that UX team where you join as a project manager, but with the intention to get involved with a UX team? And I'd like to think you might be able to bring that up from the beginning. And you're going to come in as project manager. You'll be billable as a project manager. You might not necessarily have to take such a big dip in pay because you're coming in at a level you're already used to. But everyone knows your intention is to sidestep your way into that team within the organisation. So that sort of opportunity isn't as frequent, but I do think it could be a nice way to go in rather than just going, hey, look, I'm a project manager with 10 years experience, but now because I'm so passionate about UX, I want to get into UX. That's a tough one. It is tough. But I would look at China. There's courses all the time now. I don't really. It's harsh. I don't want to sort of be harsh against courses, but I don't know if that gives you enough differentiation these days. I would
May I
look
say
at trying
probably
to see
not.
Yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic about it.
Not on this
But,
show.
yeah, that's very true. I forgot where I was. So I would probably look at trying to maybe do some personal projects, or things relevant in your current role and see where the crossovers might be. And obviously, portfolio wise, you're going to be limited in what you can show. It's a tough one. It is a tough one, but I've seen it happen. I've seen lots of recruiters even go into UX, sometimes well and sometimes not so well. But it can happen. But it's tough. I'm not going to lie. The one thing I will say is though, with getting that first UX job, I feel the first one is always your hardest.
Yeah.
As soon as you got 2 years commercial experience, it becomes 10 times easier. And if you've got commercial experience that will relate, i.e., through project management or development or whatever, some sort of commercial experience that will relate to what UXs have to do, or just generally commercial experience, dealing with stakeholders and working with others, and having that emotional maturity that you get from a few years in the business, whatever business that you might be, you will still be a step above some others potentially, depending on what the others have in their back pockets as well. But it's tough, but don't lose hope.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've got more questions coming in, so I don't even have to throw you softballs. We have real questions we've got two in YouTube. So we've got someone named MS, and then we've got our good friend Plexus. And quickly, Ralisa says, no, I have a lot of courses completed as well. I really appreciate the effort into answering and thinking out loud on this one. Thank you for the ideas. So over in YouTube, someone named MS, and I don't always recognize everybody's YouTube or Twitch names, says, as a mom who has not been in the workforce for quite a few years and no paid work in my portfolio, just passion projects and nonprofit work, what can I do to help get myself in the door? So I don't know MS necessarily, but it sounds like someone who's maybe transitioning into UX, where maybe they've just done some passion projects or sample projects or nonprofit work, and they don't have that kind of I hate to say real work experience, because I'm sure some of that was or felt real, but the corporate work experience. What can someone do when they're out of a boot camp or a program and they have boot camp projects or passion projects? How do we get them into those first jobs?
Yeah, again, it's a tough one because the competition is so rife. There's the supply and demand at the junior end of the scale. And again, I use the word junior lightly. It is so tough. But for those types of, generally speaking, a lot of clients wouldn't really pay someone like me for that level. I have placed juniors before, but more commonly, you get that from contacting clients or internal recruiters directly, and seeing whose radars you can get on. I would definitely advise things like networking, because a lot of the time, there'll be clients and maybe startups out there who don't have big budgets, but they do need some UX support, and they might not have enough money to pay someone like me to get someone like you, for example, Debbie. But they need someone, someone who's more skilled than their current digital design team at the moment. And that mum returning to work who's worked on passion projects and has got some base level of understanding, or maybe done a course, they're not going to be asking for the moon on the stick in terms of pay. So that might work for that company. So you've got to do a bit of your own grafting in terms of network, and sort of recruiting, if you like, recruit yourself, and get on the radars directly with these clients or internal recruiters. And if there's ever a chance where you might start off on a 3-day gig or a 2-day gig, if you see that opportunity and you go for it, if there's any way you can obviously turn that into something full time, again, as a recruiter, I just really want to see that pedigree, because there are so many candidates out there at the moment who have just got the course on their CV, or who've just got personal projects on their CV. It is really tough. I want to see that chunk of real commercial work that will then separate you from those sea of juniors. And it is difficult because
do apprenticeships,
the courses,
when you're looking for that work, that, like, when we talk about how candidates can stand out, especially when they're looking for that first job, do internships and apprenticeships count, or are you really looking for someone to have a job to get a job?
Yeah, ideally, yes, it's a chicken and egg scenario, isn't it? Ideally, yeah, if they had 2 years at a big well-known name, or 1 year at a big well-known name, fantastic, they're going to get more of a look at. The reality is that's harder to come by. So if they have an internship or an apprenticeship with, let's say, one of the big consultancies, which is often where I advise juniors to look at, then 100% I'll look at that. I'll look at those people. And the reality is, if you've got an internship with somewhere like KPMG or Capgemini, that internship, the quality behind that is probably going to be just as good, if not better, than a mom and pop shop where you've been redesigning a menu or something for the last 6 months.
Right.
So definitely, if you can afford, that's the other thing. Not all the internships pay or pay well. If you can afford to do that, then definitely I would look at internships and apprenticeships, where you've got a good team that you can generally skill up on, and have some ammo to put in your portfolio, then definitely. And as I say, going back to the courses, it's a bit of a shame because the market has become so flooded and saturated. It's also become quite diluted, and I remember years back when I used to get some of the guys out of places like GA, for example, and place them. They were brilliant. They were good portfolios. I could see the difference in portfolios before and after, and now
it's changed, hasn't it?
It's changing that they're so similar. So there's not enough differentiation there because one portfolio to the other is starting to look very similar, and I don't want to sort of dog on too much, even though we are on this podcast. But because some of the guys that come out there are really good, but I just think more expectations need to be managed, especially when you're spending a chunk of cash and then finding yourself looking for a job for 6 months. So I don't know if I answered the question at all. I can't remember.
I don't know. MS, let us know if you have any follow-up questions. Remember, everybody's welcome to give us follow-up questions, and we're still here for another 40 minutes, so let us know what questions you have for Nick, and I'm going to put up our next one, which is from...
Sorry, Debbie. I was just going to say, so if you are in that situation, do task yourself with trying to find... we're trying to get it onto the books with clients directly or internal recruiters directly. Unfortunately, you just can't rely on external recruiters like me, because a lot of the time we're just not going to get approached for juniors because the clients can have their pick.
Right. That's a good point too, that sometimes a recruiter, it might be a better relationship for the mid-level or higher, where you can really tell the story and sell them. Because there's 5,000 people applying for one junior job. We don't exactly need Nick to help us place this candidate.
Yeah, but we'll try and help with tips and advice, obviously.
Yeah, thank you for that. And hi to Dominic. I'm glad you could join us today. Let us know if you have any questions. We are live, though sadly LinkedIn is usually 2 or 3 minutes behind. So I'm suggesting everyone please join on YouTube, or now we're live on Twitch, which has less than a 7-second delay. It is like so live. It's really fun. We're deltacx.com on Twitch, all written out because someone was DeltaCX. So we've got a question from Anu, but first we're going to put up Plexus' question. And Dominic, will get to your question after Anu. Plexus asks the question, I have 30 years of UX experience. Should I hype this in an interview or not mention it and only focus on the last 10 or so years due to the challenges and the gaps, aka the BS, that permeates the recruiting process? I think we're talking about, will there be some ageism for someone with 20, 30 years experience? Nick?
Yeah, again, a good question. So I would say it depends on the role that you're going for, first of all. If you're going for a head of role, then absolutely talk about it. If you're going for more of a hands-on sort of senior to lead level role, it's a tricky one. I'd like to, so many clients will talk about, especially these days, will talk about inclusivity and not having those sort of ageism viewpoints. The reality is some of it is bull. I've seen it happen. There's one particular candidate I know of who is brilliant. I've had a contract for me before, and she is older, and she struggled in the past to find work. And this is someone who's got, let's say, 10 years experience, who's competing for roles with people who've got 4 years experience. And so I unfortunately do think ageism absolutely exists within some of these clients that we've worked with and try and get jobs with. Anyway, going off track a little bit, in terms of what to do with that, I would say if you can condense it, I think I mentioned it right at the start. Some of one of the pitfalls I find with people with as much as 30 years experience is we end up with a CV that has got 30 years of experience. Has got pages and pages. Make sure you're strict with yourself and condense that CV still to 2 pages max, and then condense further still some of the work you did in the past. And then ramp it up to the more recent work, the last 3 to 5 years. That's going to be most relevant to. But hopefully, all that other UX experience prior will still go to show your sort of your gravitas, your seniority within UX, especially in comparison to other people probably applying for that same role, because there's not many others that will probably have 30 years of UX experience. I'd also be interested to know, has that been 30 years of straight up, one UX role to another, or do you mean you've worked in a general digital capacity which has touched on UX over the last 30 years? Because that's a little bit different.
No, I know him, and I think he has been real UX for about 30 years. He's in Canada.
Okay, cool. Well, then, yeah, I mean, I definitely lean on that. The thing there to focus on is, if you go to a company that isn't UX mature, they might get intimidated by that, and I think it again depends on where you're going to apply for. I'd like to think if you went for somewhere that's got a good design team there, or a good level of UX maturity, and they're really working on some complex stuff, and they know what it's like, then that will go a long way with your experience. But if you're applying to like an agency role and it's a hands-on gig and you're talking about 30 years experience, they're probably going to think, well, this guy's going to be way too strategic for us, and he's going to be a bit too rigid perhaps, or with their ways. Because I do think that's a perception sometimes that the market can have with people who've got more experience in that. UXs have their way of, Jacob Nielsen's law of doing things, and if it doesn't go their way, then they'll self-implode and become hard to work with. And obviously that's not the case with everyone, but it is the case with a few. So we want to make sure that you don't project yourself in that way, and that you're someone who can still be hands-on, you can still be flexible, but you've got 30 years of experience to back up your reasoning.
Great, thank you so much. We have a flood of questions coming into the chat. I think we've got 28 people joining us live across the platforms. Thanks to everybody. So I'm going to just take a quick moment to remind everybody, you can please subscribe on YouTube at the Delta CX channel. You'll be notified when we're live, plus the pre-recorded videos that I put up sometimes. We are now streaming live on Twitch. It will not have our archives, but it is way more fun for the live streams. So on Twitch, you can find us as Delta CX. all written out with DOT. Also put !giveaway into the chat over on Twitch, and you can join our Twitch only giveaway for a signed hardcover copy of my book that I will sign to you personally and freaking mail to you if my post office will allow me to send to your country. And we'll do that drawing at the end of February. So I'm accepting giveaway entries all February. Please follow us there as well. My goal is 50 followers on Twitch by the end of February. And of course, if you're in YouTube, press like so you can help us out in the algorithm, and very quickly join the Slack channel and tip jar. A tip jar always welcome. It is no longer the delicious cheese fund. It is now the new streaming computer fund. So thank you for everybody who does that. And so Nick, I'm going to warn you because of the amount of questions that we're starting to get. We've got Anu, Solomon, Quesia, I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Solomon, Tango, who we know is Catherine now, and all kinds of peeps. I'm going to ask you a little bit for the lightning version of some of your answers. So just so we can fit in more questions. And Plexus says, I got no work for a year when I was using a 2-page resume, and then I switched to an 8-page resume. I got a full-time job within 2 months, and I already got an interview within a week of being laid off. So maybe the 8-page novelette version is working for Plexus. Who knows? Nicole asks, is it 1 entry per person for the Twitch giveaway? I think so. I can't remember if I put it as 1 entry or 4, but either way, you are limited to entries in the Twitch giveaway. Nobody game the system. All right, let's see if I can find some of these questions. They're already rolling back off my window. Okay, we've got a question from Anu, and it sounds like Anu is in the US, so this may or may not be perfect for you, Nick, as you were in the UK. But Anu says, what would you recommend to an immigrant with work authorization in the U.S.? Do recruiters skip over hiring them, even as an intern, because of visa issues? I have a master's degree in psychology from India. Do you find, I mean, again, you can't necessarily speak to the U.S., but do you find in the U.K., and again, lightning version, do you find in the U.K. that some recruiters or hiring managers tend to skip over people who might need visa sponsorship?
Yeah, absolutely. Some companies just won't provide the sponsorship. Again, it depends on the level, because sometimes they will at the higher levels if they really can't find, that perfect head of, for example. At the lower levels, at the sort of junior to mid to senior levels, there's enough options out there a lot of the time not to go down the sponsorship route. So unfortunately, it does mean a lot of clients, especially a lot of the clients that I offer sponsorship, so there's not a lot of point in us trying to champion someone who needs a visa. But one thing I would say, there is a link. I'm sure America has a version as well, but in the UK there's a link on the government website which will list out a whole load of companies that will provide sponsorship. And again, if you can do my job and try and pinpoint some of those companies who you know for a fact will provide sponsorship, and do a bit of investigation to see who's looking for a UX designer. That might be a good route to go down. But unfortunately, a lot of clients won't provide sponsorship, at least not for the sort of junior to mid to senior levels.
Great, thanks. And I did want to remember to ask you about halfway through the show, Nick, is Zebra People looking for people? Should people send you their resumes or CVs? How can people get in touch with you and see if you can help them find a job? Do you ever deal outside of the UK or just inside?
Yeah, well, most of the roles that we cover tend to be inside the UK. With London-based companies, not that that makes a whole lot of difference at the moment, but just worth bearing in mind, if you are applying outside of London, a lot of these companies that are looking, they will eventually, hopefully, require people in offices. So bear that in mind. But yeah, 100%. We've had a really busy January. The market generally seems really busy. So if you're looking for a UX job, we've got a bunch of contracts. We've got even more permanent roles. Do send me an email, which is ngrantham@zebrapeople.com. So that's ngrantham, all one word, @zebrapeople.com, or send me a LinkedIn invite or LinkedIn message, and I'll get back to you. But again, unfortunately, none of the clients that we're currently dealing with offer sponsorship. But not to say that there aren't out there, but there's loads that do, but we just don't have any right now.
All right, thank you. And we'll repeat that at the end of the show as well. So let's go to Quesia, who I'm surely pronouncing incorrectly. And they've got a two-part question. The first half was, did you notice a difference in the quality of work of entry-level designers who have a graduate degree, like a master's or PhD, versus a boot camp, versus self-taught designers? So many YouTube videos on how to become a UX designer with no experience, LOL. Can you, as a recruiter, tell a difference between the quality of work based on how people learned?
If you were to put two portfolios in front of me and say which one of these did a master's in psychology and which one did a boot camp, I reckon I'd probably be able to have a good crack at telling which was which. The boot camp version will be a bit of a cookie cutter version. There'll be a nice mix of visuals and narration, but there will be, I don't know, I think it will probably lack a bit of the depth compared to the person who did a master's in a related degree, HCI or psychology. I would imagine that and a little bit more, or get a bit deeper on the research side, compared to the person who's done the boot camp. the one who's done like an online how-to video of how to become a UX designer. I mean, good luck. I didn't know they actually exist, but that's a tough one, trying to get an actual UX job via a YouTube video. I don't know many other professions you would do that with, but yeah, I would say the degrees and education generally, it depends on the client. Some will be more bothered about it than others. Some won't give flying fuck about where you've studied, but some will. And if I cotton on to someone who's done something to do with psychology or product design, actual product design, when product design used to mean 3D design, or industrial design, something related, then I will probably mention it or bring it up in discussion, because when I put profiles forward to a client, I will add a summary as to why I put this person forward, why I think they're good, why they want it, why they're available, blah, blah, blah. And the education thing will be something I'll mention if it's related. If you've done a degree in, I don't know, history, I probably won't. But yeah, in terms of seeing the difference, again, that can be dependent on the person sometimes. But yeah, generally speaking, I would say the depth will be the difference as to how involved that person's got with things like research and analysis before moving on to the shiny visuals.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to keep running through these questions. We've got one from Tango, and Tango says, how do you normally, it says, how do you normally assess a candidate's fit to the job?
That's a big question. There's so many different ways to look at it, and again, it will depend on the job, depend on the level. depend on the duration, the salary, etc. But as I said at the start of the podcast, I'm looking at two things. Obviously, the CV to show where you've worked. I might get a bit of an idea of your pedigree. I might look at the durations you've been at places. Again, it would be different as to whether I'm looking at you as a contractor or a permanent placement. And then I'm sort of getting a view on you on that, and then I'm moving swiftly onto the portfolio. And the portfolio for me is going to be the big thing that will tell me something about you. Unless you're a user researcher, then I'm not necessarily even expecting to see a portfolio. But if you're a UX designer, as I say, the CV should show me where you've worked, and the portfolio should show me how you've worked. And it's that how that for me will determine what type of designer you're selling yourself as. So if I look in your portfolio and I'm going straight into those screenshots of what it looks like on a Mac device or something or other, then I'm guessing you're more UI. And if I'm seeing, however, a bit more of an introduction where I'm seeing, almost like a hypothesis or tell me about the problem, and then I'm seeing the different stages, then I'm thinking, okay, this person is more of a UX designer or a UX consultant, and I'm being walked through the case study, and it's all making sense to me. And I'm seeing the research, I'm seeing the deliverables, I'm seeing the various different stages, and also I'm seeing reasoning. That's something I think we all know about process now. I feel like I almost get bored about saying, make sure you show your process in the portfolio, because it's been hammered home so often now. But that's not enough now. I want to see, why did he do it like this? What did he learn from that? Because otherwise, I'm seeing another sort of cookie cutter portfolio, which it might still work for the client, depending on the position. But yeah, I want to see a bit more depth, and also I want to see some of the low fidelity. It's really important, I think, because sometimes, all the time, it's not a case of how good you are at using software to show me, a pretty picture. I want to know see where that thinking is starting off from. I want to know how that thinking is happening. But again, even this is subjective, because lots of other recruiters or hiring managers, they'll have a different view on it. That this is purely the way I look at it. So don't take it as gospel. But yeah, so that's what I'm using to determine whether you're fit for the job or not.
Thank you. And I guess Tango really loved that answer, because she's donated £5 to the computer fund. It did not pop up on the screen. I'm sorry about that. I will have to fix my overlays in my little studio setup. But thank you so much, Tango, for the £5. It shall go towards the new computer fund. We have a zillion questions in the chat room. Nick, we are going to run out of time, so I'm going to inspire you to try to give the short lightning versions of your answers where possible. I know we are all long-winded, but we have so many questions piling up. So we've got MS again, who asks, any advice on finding apprenticeships? Because internships almost always require candidates to be uni students.
Off the top of my head, I'm not too sure. Like I said, the big ones that I know about are the ones with the consultancies. So you could try the Big Four, and also some of the larger agencies. But I don't know a lot of the finite details of getting those roles, unfortunately. But sorry for that. I can't give you any more.
No, and I agree with Nick. I do find that I'm seeing more apprenticeships through agencies and consultancies than I am through companies. I'll be speaking on Monday on the live podcast here about my apprenticeship model, which I hope companies will steal and adopt and use. We've got Priscilla. Thanks for joining us. Priscilla asks, if you are a non-UK resident, is it still possible to apply for a junior position in the UK or Scotland given Brexit regulations?
Some of this I still need to get my head around, but I think if you're already in the UK and you're a European citizen, I think you can still get a new job and not get chucked out. But if you're currently outside, then I think you're going to need to apply for a permit. Whether you're EU, definitely if you're non-EU, but even if you're EU now due to Brexit, unfortunately, I think you'll have to apply for a visa of some sort, I think.
I think so too, but I'm not an expert there. So sorry about that, Priscilla. We've got Natalie in LinkedIn, and I cannot put LinkedIn questions up on the screen, so I'm just going to read this one. What are your thoughts about uploading CVs in plain text? Does it matter with all the different job platforms? Should we also have a stylized CV?
I've got no problem with just having a CV in Word, to be honest with you. Some people go for a PDF. I don't think it makes a big difference. The stylized ones, I like, some people want to be a bit different and stand out a little bit, but you've got, especially as a UX, if applying for a UX job, you've got to stop yourself and see that fine line between, having a bit of impact with your CV and then making it hard to actually read through your CV. So for me personally, I think a LinkedIn profile is a really good way of just summing up your experience in its chronological order. Everyone knows how to look at it, how to read through it. I wouldn't over stylize it. I just don't, unless you're applying for a graphic design position, but that's a different podcast, I think. But yeah, in terms of what to save it under, I mean, some people have more of a thing for PDFs. I'm not too bothered, Word, PDF. Sometimes it might also depend on if you're having to put it through on a portal. Then I think those portals can understand Word documents better, because different things get pulled across into different boxes.
Okay, great. And Dimitris, I asked you if you feel like your question's been answered because it was kind of similar to Tango's, but let me know if you want me to ask it. For now, I'll move on to Eugene's question, which I can put up on the screen until we hear from Dimitris. And Eugene asks, hey, Debbie and Nick, curious to hear your thoughts on the best way to present strategic work. Use case of a senior designer working in the capacity of advisor and consultant to senior management.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I would say I would still like to see a bit of a walkthrough of your process. This will cue the generic pictures of people standing by a bunch of post-it notes, umming about different processes. But I still think there's value in some of that, and just more steps through on a case study to highlight what exactly you've been doing, what you've done, what data you've used, why you've used that data. But mix it up a little bit. I still do want to see, I don't want to just be bombarded with war and peace over your strategic decision making. I still want to see a few visuals to mix it up a little bit. But yeah, I guess for me, that'll probably add a few more pages onto your case study as to how in depth you're going. So rather than someone who is less strategic going from, right, well, we started off with a bit of research, then we did some low fidelity prototypes, that went to high fidelity, and then Bob's your uncle, we've got your answer. I'd probably be looking for a bit more meat in between that to show me how strategic you actually are. So hopefully that answers your question. But on the subject of portfolios, I always like to think that a portfolio should really speak for itself. And whether it's, even if you had it printed out or you have it on a computer, I think a good portfolio is one where you can leave it in a room and then leave the room, and whoever goes into that room next should be able to flick through it and understand what is happening, what they're looking at, why things have happened. And that person could be head of UX, a project manager, a fellow UX designer, a graphic designer, or even the bloody cleaner. I think a good portfolio should be able to walk you through it and guide you through what's happening.
Thank you. And Ralitza reminds us, if we're being strategic, you won't do war and peace. One of the best skills in knowing how to communicate is how brief or extensive you should be. Well said. Yeah. Dimitris had a question that was a bit of a variation of Tango's question, which was, how do you assess if a candidate has sent you a CV and or portfolio full of UX fluff? How do you make sure you see through the glitter?
Well, a bit like your logo, I often sometimes a telltale sign is the three circles, and you've got it's I don't know, UI, research, service design, something UX, and someone might put me in the middle. That is that's your standard sort of
no Venn diagrams, people.
Introduction. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Sometimes a bit like at school when you've had to take up a certain amount of pages, so you chuck in some of the visuals in there and some slogans to beef up your case study. But yeah, so in terms of seeing through the glitter, as I said before, I want to see a bit more of the low fidelity stuff. The dirty work. I want to know where these pretty pictures have come from.
Yeah.
Process. They haven't just been magicked up. Yeah, exactly. So, but I want to see it from really early stages. Personally, I had a chat with the head of UX once, and he's telling me about how the UX thinking. You can write it down on a post-it note or on a scrap of paper, And that is the valuable piece. Past, once it goes through the stages, then it's a case of, right, well, how good at using software is this person? But a lot of that thinking and reasoning, that won't necessarily be shown on a nice visual, and don't be afraid. I don't, some people might think, oh, I don't want to put all these messy sketches in a portfolio, but I like them. I want to put a nice board around it if you want to make it look nice, but I want to see a bit of a transition from point A to point Z. And I even when I did my design degree, designing cars, my tutors would still want to see, right, well, how did you get to this car at the end? What all the different sequences towards that? And it's the same for so many other sectors, I should imagine. People want to be told a story and know how you got to that point. So if I'm going straight into the glittery bits, I'm probably going to think you're more of a visual designer, to be honest.
Yeah, and here I always say we want to see the science and technique, not just the building blocks. Where am I? Okay, I'm here somewhere.
That's it.
So we've got a question from Darren. Thanks for doing the lightning round. Nick, it's very nice of you to get rapid fire questions. You're awesome.
I'm trying.
Thank you. So everyone is grateful, and there's thanks up and down all over the place. So thank you. Darren says, a friend of the show, Darren, who will be our guest on February 17th, says, what do you think of the automatic resume generator tools? Ooh, okay, so not the ones that read the resume, that generate them.
So in terms of, I'm not too familiar with it. So where you can just chuck in your data into an online tool and it will churn out a pre-made CV. Is that right?
That sounds like it. I think I've seen
those.
Like. Yeah, I mean, he's on YouTube, so that's a 20 or 30 second delay.
Oh man, that's lazy. Come on, if you need a CV generator, it's as I said. I know someone before said about getting a job with an 8-page CV, and that does happen. But I think people, if you've got a 1, 2, maybe 3-page CV, you don't need a generator to do that. Surely, I mean, like I said, if you're really unsure, just stick to what your LinkedIn profile looks like. And again, if you're I just think if you're a UX designer, we're looking at how someone would understand what is in front of them and read through it easily and understand it easily. I don't know. I kind of think, it sounds harsh, but I kind of think if you need a CV generator and you're applying for a UX position, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, I wonder if he's talking about like JobScan or one of those, but he says the solution automatically generates a resume, and it does that so that your resume is more closely aligned with the tools the recruiters are using to scan and find people.
Right, okay, so it's going to point out certain buzzwords that a buzzword recruiter might look for. Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I would say get in touch with, everyone has access to at least one half decent recruiter these days. I'd speak to that person and ask them, some advice on how to make their profile stand out or be relevant to a role. I think I wouldn't want to rely on one of those sorts of tools to find me a job personally. I'd want to speak to an actual person and get some expert advice on how to do it. But it will change.
Good.
Some it is a bit of a name of the game, isn't it? But sometimes there must be benefits to it. That's why the thing exists in the first place, I guess. But I personally would just try and speak to a recruiter.
And Abhishek, your question was next, but I see you jumped from LinkedIn to YouTube, and so when you ask it on LinkedIn, it was next, and so we're going to ask it now. How does a UX designer or consultant in an enterprise organization make a space in corporate vertical hierarchy in a tech industry, especially when stacked against a high density of dev teams? I'm not sure that's exactly Nick's arena. Nick, is there anything you can throw at this, or is it because you are a recruiter?
I'm still trying to understand the question. Right,
yeah,
so hang on.
You're a recruiter.
American tech industry, especially when it stands against the high density of teams. I mean, yeah, I could maybe give a top line on that, and hopefully rely on using, your voice and your reasoning to bring some of those stakeholders, internal stakeholders on board, not only the dev team, but the guys who the dev team report to. I think that's the important part that a UX consultant will play sometimes, where they are that bridge for reasoning and making sure that the senior stakeholders realize why things need to be done a certain way, past what the developers want to do, because that's all they are technically capable of, or whatever. The developers aren't doing your job, and that's why a good person needs to be able to come in and stand their ground, for doing things the UX way, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's answered the question. I didn't fully get it, maybe, but I've tried.
Yeah, this question, we do have questions that came in before this. So Glitch, Andy, plus I see you. But Kayleen's question, I think, is a good follow-up question. So I threw it in a little early. As for the automatic resume scanners, would a resume without job description keywords not get seen by recruiters? Are you looking at every CV and resume, or do you have a system that is scanning for certain words and you might miss people who didn't use those words?
Sure. I personally don't, but lots of recruiters do. And yeah, I guess if you're looking for a job, you want to do all you can to maximise your potential to get picked up, whether it's by me or a bunch of other recruiters. But yeah, I personally don't. I will do a lot of my searching through. I'll look at people respond to me, and my own little black book of people. But yeah, so in terms of what I'm searching for, there'll be some buzzwords, and I mean, I'd expect you to have a few buzzwords in your CV if you're applying for a UX job. There's certain things I'm gonna, every UX CV will probably have. So I would advise having a few in there, definitely. I mean, I don't think it should be something you have to be mindful of.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes you aware of which job you're going for in the first place, and yeah, make sure it's tailored to that.
Okay, our next question. We've only got about 8 more minutes, everybody. We'll get to as many of these as we can. I'm sorry if we don't get to your question. Glitch says, "Hi, Debbie. I recently saw your article on design systems. I'm a UI designer, and after reading that, I became concerned about my future. Will UI designers become obsolete? In my opinion, absolutely not. I think UI designers' jobs will just evolve a little bit, because as people are more reliant on design systems, they don't need the UI designer to design every single page of the thing the way you used to do all those mock-ups. That's just my personal opinion and my prediction for the future, but let's see what Nick thinks. Nick, I know that sometimes UI designers' jobs could be evolving because of people shifting towards component libraries and UI kits and design systems. Do you think the UI designer job is going to change in the future? And I don't think they're going to go obsolete, but do you think they're going to go obsolete?
I definitely don't think they'll be obsolete, but I definitely think that there will be different versions of UI designer. So, for example, when we think about UI designer, we're thinking of visuals, but as we see this rise of voice technology, could a UI designer's background actually mean that they've got English skills, or history skills, something that will relate a little bit more towards verbal communication and listening, rather than what their visual capabilities are? Because we're still talking about interaction design. We're not talking about visual design. I think that there will probably be more varied backgrounds for UI designers, but I definitely don't see it as becoming obsolete, unless we have this product design title that's sweeping the nations, taking over everything. Then that could make UI and UX obsolete, but hopefully not.
Hopefully not. So we've got a few more minutes left. Reminder to everybody, please join on Twitch. The delay is so short, it's much more of a conversation. That's probably why I'm seeing a lot more questions on Twitch than some of the other ones, because of that delay. So especially if you want to get in your question faster, Twitch will be the way. But over on YouTube, we've got a question from Andy, who says, how would someone make up for a lack of production team, DevOps, PM, bigger teams, for a company if they've only ever done small contracts or freelance design work that's more isolated? Nick?
So some make up for a lack of production team. So I mean, Andy, I'd like to know, trying to get a job with a company that has one of those bigger teams? And I guess that working as a contractor, you've not had as much collaboration with those teams.
Yeah, I would imagine he might be
Yeah, I
getting
mean,
an interview who says, like, how do you work with DevOps and product managers? But it sounds like he's done a lot more freelancing or things that were more isolated.
yeah, it would be interesting to know Andy, what you did before freelancing, because I've seen this before where serial freelancers or people who've maybe gone freelancing a bit too early in their career, in my opinion, and they haven't achieved certain stripes within the ladder before going freelancing, and therefore, as much as you might have enjoyed the ride as a freelancer with those freelance rates, then trying to go back into a more meaty perm role or a more substantial contract role, you haven't picked up some of the experience that you would do with those longer term positions. It can be harder, so it can sort of bite you in the butt afterwards. I don't know if that's for, but yeah, it's a tricky one. If you haven't got the experience and they're asking for that experience, and what can you do? My advice would be to maybe look at a permanent job again, where you can gain that experience. For me, I think permanent jobs will give you the most sort of leveling up, if you like, compared to freelance jobs or contract jobs.
I'm going to agree, because that's what I went through in like 2010, 2011, 2012, where I'd done 15 years of freelancing and running my own agency. And now a lot of companies and corporations didn't take me seriously. Recruiters didn't take me seriously. And so I went and got regular everyday jobs in San Francisco and was able to quickly build up who I was by working those jobs, even though they were for less money than I was used to making. At least it helped me level up. We're nearly out of time, so we are just going to have to take and Austin, we actually answered that question earlier, I think. So you'll have to replay us. We're going to go with Plus Red's question, who I think is Wilson over in Twitch. And Wilson is asking, is there a point in wasting your time with recruiters that use LinkedIn in-mail copy-paste messages? Every time I speak with them, they don't understand what the company looks for, and they don't seem to know what UX is. LOL.
Yeah, my recruitment brethren are very varied, and there's a lot out there who are UX specialists one day and developer specialists the next. So yeah, those copy and paste messages are a tricky one to sort of decipher who are the ones worth dealing with. Because I will also send some messages a bit like that sometimes, but it's more a time issue where I want to contact a bunch of people, and I think they're relevant, but I just don't have time to send them each an individual message. I personally would have a look at that recruiter's profile, and yeah, maybe have a chat with him, and hopefully it wouldn't take you too long to suss out, whether they're someone who knows what they're talking about, or are they another buzzword recruiter, like I mentioned earlier, who has picked up UX or wireframing a number of times in your
call
LinkedIn
center
profile.
Recruiter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm getting the feeling that someone named Cemetery Weather on Twitch is a coworker of yours. Do we recognize the face?
No, not at all.
Okay, well,
No.
Cemetery Weather is a big fan of yours, whoever that might be.
Thank you.
So yes, so
Speaking
we're gonna.
of fans, just a quick shout out to
Yes.
to Darren Hood. Like some of the stuff you put on LinkedIn is on the nail. I won't always like it because I've got to be commercial, but well done to you, Darren. I hope I answered your question properly. I'm not sure, but anyway, just a quick shout out.
Yes, and Darren's going to be on the show again and again, twice this month, I think. We cannot get enough of him. He's just a genius. So quickly, before we say goodbye to everybody, let me just quickly tell you some of the things that are coming up on the live show, which again, you can catch on YouTube as well as on Twitch now. So I hope everybody will sneak over to Twitch and follow us there. Let's see, Monday the 8th. So that's it for this week. Monday the 8th, I will be premiering my apprenticeship model, and one of my apprentices may or may not appear on the show with me. She's still deciding. Tuesday the 9th is Office Hours Ask Me Anything, so get those questions ready. Wednesday the 10th, I am not doing a live show. We will be having our Delta CX Slack channel live networking. So join the Slack channel, deltacx.link/join Slack if you'd like to be part of that. I'm trying not to read some of my calendar things out loud. I'm like talk to Austin. Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to Austin, and he's here today. Monday the 15th is Delta CX podcast with Sean McSharry, who's going to talk about UX and autism. Tuesday the 16th, Office Hours Ask Me Anything. Wednesday the 17th, Darren Hood. We're going to talk about what if UX were held accountable? What would that look like, and how would that change our jobs? Monday the 22nd is going to be Dimitris, who is also here today. He's going to talk about data-driven versus data-informed. Tuesday the 23rd, Office Hours Ask Me Anything, but it's Ask Us Anything because it's with special guests Darren Hood and Nick Fine. So it's a 12-inch dance remix, long version on February 23rd. Ask the Three Amigos Anything. Wednesday the 24th, mark your calendars. I'm going to be doing a comedy and tragedy podcast as I redo some of the slides from my upcoming HR training where I show you some of the worst job descriptions I found. So bring your tissues. And then let's see, then we're in March. So I won't tell you about March just yet. I don't want to overwhelm you, but the short version is mark your calendars. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. We're going live for an hour just about every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday until time ends, or I guess until Christmas. So, Nick, let's repeat. Where can everybody find you? How can they get in touch? Are you a tweeter? Where does everyone find you?
I'm on Twitter. I don't really do much tweeting unless it's to complain about stuff, which I guess Twitter is good for anyway. But LinkedIn, Nick Grantham, as ever people on LinkedIn, or my email, which is again ngrantham@zebrapeople.com. Do feel free to get in touch. And funny enough, just that point about job briefs. It was only the other day I saw a post from an internal recruiter at a well-known brand looking for a senior visual UX designer. So, but that's an intern. So, come on, clients, you've got to sort out your process, sort out your people, and make sure you've got some maturity in there, because otherwise you're going to end up with visual UX designers.
All right. Well, I hope that's well paid for the 8 million things they expect you to be good at. And Abhishek is asking, Is there a calendar or some way to find future events? Yes. If you go to, I think it's deltacx.link/events, I think that will dump you in a Google Calendar with all of this stuff, and you can add it to your Google Calendar if you would like. It's at the top of my LinkedIn. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, it's in the top graphic. I've got the URL. I think it's deltacx.link, which is my URL shortener /events. Try that and add it to your Google Calendar. So on that note, I'm going to have to play us out of here with the official closing video. But Nick, thank you so much for that was the most rapid fire questions I think we have ever had. I really appreciate you giving us all this great information and keeping up with the crazy onslaught. And, maybe we can do this again after we give you a rest. You're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. So
my pleasure. Thank you very much. And as I said, thanks very much for asking me on in the first place. And sorry if I, might have rambled a couple of answers, but hopefully it's beneficial, and happy to come back another time. But yeah, best of luck everyone in the meantime, and thanks again.
Yes, absolutely. Really helpful. So thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and I hope to see you Monday. Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.
Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Contact us for a free consultation.